Okay, well, I'm delighted to say we've got Eamon Murphy from the Echo joining us now. Not to talk rugby, I don't think, Eamon.
Absolutely.
Are you following us Ireland's call all the way to the where is it on? France.
Listen, we're too busy with hurling and Cork and football. We've no time for this rugby malarkey at all.
Yeah, and tell us about Cork at the moment, because it's a bit of a shock, I suppose, to people. Like, you probably would have seen Glen Rovers all year, but the fact that the 28 times county champions winners, they're 97 years at the top tier, the club of Jack Lynch, Christy Ring, Patrick Horgan in 3 county finals there not so long ago. They've been relegated, and there's no Northside hurling team in the top 12 now.
Yeah, I suppose it's the fact it's the top 12, isn't it, that just makes it so cutthroat. Back in the day, the Glen could have gone a few seasons and did without winning county championship matches, but there wasn't any mandatory relegation. I mean, that's only in the last 15 years. So there was a bit of inevitability once they lost to Bishopstown in that last group game that they were going to go down. Kanturk are a dogged team. They're your classic kind of country team. It's all the cliches that you bring them up to a rural venue and you get stuck into the Glen and all the rest. But I think what it was is that Kanturk were unlucky not to beat SARS, who were one of the county favourites in the first round. They drew, they lost to Newtown in the second round again. They also probably should have won, whereas the Glen had lost 3 matches in a row, a desperate defeat to Bishopstown. And it's not trying to insult Bishopstown, but whoever was in Bishopstown's group this year would have been saying, they're going to be in the relegation final, they're not going to win a group match. And I don't know, did the Glen go into the game with that bit of just baggage on their shoulders, bit of arrogance, and get caught? But I think the shock really is that on paper, the Glen's team is up there with the best 4 or 5 in the county. If you're picking 6 teams to win it out of the 12, they'd have been in that top 6 more than anything to do with tradition or past counties. It's just, they still have Hoggy. He's still getting 3 or 4 scores from playing every club match in Cork. He does it at inter-county, let alone in, at club level. And they won a minor county in Cork 2 years ago. So they have a couple of good young lads too. But they just got into that. I don't know, they were going well in the first round against Blackrock, got caught in the second half, and they were stuck to the ground ever since.
Yeah, because I think in the league, didn't they play Bishopstown? And Glen would have been down plenty of players, and yet they went out and absolutely hockeyed them.
Bishopstown got relegated in Division 2 of the league, So there was no logic.
You look at the quality of some of these players that Glen have. I mean, Hoggy's the obvious one, but you have Owen Downey, Robert Downey, Simon Kennefick, who's Christy Ring's grandson, and he's a quality player. There's a lot of Dean Brosnan is another very
former Cork player, Stephen McDonald.
Yeah, how on earth has this happened though? What's your hunch on it?
Look, I think the group was a hard group in that while Bishopstown were kind of your weakest link in it. In the Glen's opening 2 matches, they didn't get to play Bishopstown in one of those 2 games. You had to play both Blackrock and Middleton. You're playing Middleton down in Carricktool, which again, I know it's leaning on this country venue thing as opposed to playing them up around the city. But, it makes it a bit tougher. It's a tighter pitch. It plays tighter anyway, even if, dimension-wise, it's not tighter. And Middleton are into the semi-final. They got top seeding. They only won it 2 years ago. Blackrock beat the Glen in the county final a couple of years ago. They were in the final last year. So it was just a tough group. The one thing that stuck out to me for the Glen before the season, I would have thought they would have competed well in it. They played that Division 2 league final against my own club, Ballincollig, who were in the 3rd tier, so Premier Intermediate. And they put their full-strength team out in that league final. And I did think that was strange in that, Ballincollig obviously went as close to full strength as they could. They're playing a team, they're playing the Glen. We don't be beating the Glen. The Glen, we don't be playing them at the top level. We're not in that grade for a long time. We haven't been there for 20 odd years at the top level. So I thought that was surprising. I was thinking, they're going into that competition and or that final, and you're going to say, we try 4 or 5 lads out. You might still play Hoggy in the Downies and all that, but on paper, I walked in there that day, I got the team sheet. I was like, geez, are they going to start with this 15? With Kennefick and Brosnan, all the lads were playing. So that did surprise me. I was wondering about their depth. But then you flip around, the 5th tier in Cork hurling is called Premier Junior. And the Glen are into the semi-final of that with their second team. They won a penalty shootout there very dramatically over the weekend on Sunday after getting relegated on the Saturday. So there are players there, they're into the minor semi-final again this year. Now, I know minors under 17 and harder to gauge, but a great win over Inniscarra the other day. They're not short players, so I think they just got into a rut. And maybe there's a lot of baggage too. The last 3 county finals in a row. I know we say they won 2 of them, but that back-to-back win was 2016. It's a long time ago now. So they lost those 3 county finals. Hoggy was injured last year. They lost the quarterfinal. So it's disappointing. Look, if you're a fan of hurling, you're disappointed for the Glen. I know they're rivals, as you said, the Northsiders. There's no Northside representation, but really over the years, that's just been the Piercig and the Glen. And the Piercig going down isn't as much of a surprise because their underage wouldn't be as vibrant and they don't have anyone as good as Hoggy on the pitch. They don't have a Cork senior starter, whereas, the Glen have 3. So look, it's disappointing. I'm disappointed for the Glen. I really am. I'm sad to see them go down, but it's just a reflection. That's where Cork are at the moment. We've gone with a very cutthroat county championship. Groups of 4, only 2 teams come out. The last day in the group, you can be looking at sneaking a quarter-final slot, or you could be maybe end up in the relegation playoff. You can end up in the relegation playoff with a win, depending on your scoring difference and how the other groups go. So, you can go down with 3 defeats now in Cork, which, as opposed, Glen went down with 4, so they can't argue with it. But, if Kanturk had gone down, they'd have gone down with 3 defeats. They drew their first match. It's just the format. It's tough. I feel sorry for them, but at the same time, it's the Glen. They don't want anyone to feel sorry for them. They'll tear into anybody, take on all comers. That's the way they operate. So that'll be up to them to boot right into it next year, and that senior A grade will be winnable for them.
Is the Cork Senior Championship better for that, Eamonn? Better for that cutthroat nature?
It probably is. Look, I've seen a few debates, particularly on Twitter. Some people saying it's very hard to build a team, or it's very hard to kind of, build a system of play and whatnot when every game is cutthroat. But look, we saw it that round robin Sam Maguire Cup thing this year. She was putrid half it. You know what I mean? Cork did well over. We beat Mayo when Mayo were probably a bit complacent, but in general, there was a lot of watery games in that, and you just don't get that in the Cork Championship at the moment. I mean, there were teams who won 2 of their 3 group games who went out on scoring total in the football, not even scoring difference, just that they had scored less goals and points than the team they finished level on scoring difference with, and they couldn't be separated. So that has to be a good thing. It's adding to drama. The crowds have been very good at all the games. There's fierce interest every weekend. The program is very well set up. It is ruthless. It is cutthroat. Would it be maybe easier if there were 4 groups of 4 as opposed to 3 groups of 4, and relegation wasn't as much of a threat? Possibly. And maybe you still only had 2 teams coming out of the group. But Cork they've set it up. There's 5 tiers of 12. I think it's very effective so far. From a supporter's point of view, it was easy for me to say, I'm not on the sideline with a team or playing for a team that are under threat of relegation. But from a supporter's point of view, they love it. People are loving it. They're lapping it up.
When you said that there's big crowds at these games, what are we talking about? I look at some of the other county championships, and there's such small parishes involved. I'm looking at Tipperary, and it's relatively small because these parishes are so small, but you're in a big stadium in Semple Stadium. I look at Dublin GA, whether it's hurling or football, the crowds tend to be quite small. What are we looking at down in Cork?
Look, I mean, I'm not going to say there's thousands at every game. No, there would have been a couple of thousand in Páirc Uí Chaoimh for the 2 double headers over the weekend, which looked teeny, of course. And I know on TG Card it looked like there was no one there, but that's still a couple of thousand people paying through the gate to go to watch matches. Up in Fermoy, it was virtually a sellout for the Glen Kanturk, as you'd expect, because that was really the game of the weekend and it wasn't being streamed. So I think they were reckoning there was around 1,500 up that. But you'd have a lot of games where there would be 400 or 500 people. But you'd remember it's Cork, so there are 5 tiers with 12 clubs in each tier. So there are multiple games going on at the same time. So it does make it harder to go to neutral games. I know myself, even trying to go to Ballincollig matches, I wouldn't get to all of them, obviously, with work and things, and just because there'd be clashes. But yeah, you're getting good crowds. Like Ballincollig in the football played Éire Óg, which was a derby match there last week. Winner takes all, or Éire Óg could have drawn, Ballincollig won it. It was out in Coachford, perfect venue for it, because anyone in that mid-Cork area could go along. And there was a huge crowd. There was bones of 1,000 people out there, 700 or 800 people. And that's brilliant in a rural venue because it's great atmosphere. And the atmosphere is adding to it. That bit of bite is adding to it.
And there's a question in from Richard Hogan for you. Would it be fair to say, Eamonn, that this is more of a blip than something serious for the Glen?
I would say yes. Even though, again, I've seen people tweeting, and it's in the context. I know what you're saying with the north side. There's no north side hurling team, and again, that's a kind of a headline stat that you'll put out there. But at the end of the day, Delaney's were a strong hurling club in the 90s. They're long gone as a force. They're not winning junior A's. St. Vincent's are up the north side as well. Brian Dillon's, Mayfield are in the semi-final and intermediate A, but they're not powerhouses of hurling. They haven't won senior titles or anything, so it's really only the Pearshig and the Glen. I would point to their underage. They have some very, very good underage players. Like you mentioned, Brosnan, Dean Brosnan's nephew, Michael Tig Brosnan, is up there with the best under 15 hurlers in Cork. He's a guaranteed Cork minor. He could even possibly be involved next year as an under 16, though Cork tend to go with the guys on the age, but he'll be thereabouts. So there's loads of talent there. Steve Lynham and Owen O'Leary didn't have great seasons for the Glen, but Owen O'Leary won an under 20 All-Ireland there. Steve Lynham is an absolute dinger of a player. He's small, very skillful, was a Cork minor last year. He only turned 18 recently. They're not short players. They really aren't short players. They're very, very good players. But will it be easy to come up? No. It won't, because there's going to be 4 or 5 good teams next year in Senior A. It won't be easy. The Pearshig are down there anyway. So, we're already looking ahead. It's terrible. They're just ready to say, geez, could they meet in the group stages, or could you get a semi-final or final with them involved? But the Pearshig didn't get out of their group this year. They drew a game, won a game, lost a game, and they didn't go out and score in difference. So,
how much credit would you give to Kanturk? Because it sounds like they've been playing good stuff.
They have, yeah. They were very well set up on the weekend, like what they used. Lorcan McLaughlin, everyone will be familiar with him. Obviously played with Cork for a number of years, but in 2013 in the 2 All-Ireland finals. Then very tasty hurler on the ball, very smart, very hard working. So he was named at 15, played as a sweeper. So they were nicely set up. But like for Kanturk, it's not really a plucky underdog story in that if you look at any Cork under 20 panel there for the last, we say 7 or 8 years, even going back when Dennis Ring was in charge when they lost a tip in those finals. Like Ryan Walsh was there, who'd be Aidan Walsh's cousin. Brian O'Sullivan was their top scorer at the weekend. He won an under 20 All-Ireland. They have a lot of good hurlers there. Darren Brown marked Hoggy at the weekend. He would have, won a Fitzgibbon Cup and been on the Cork panel fringes of it for a while. They're not short good hurlers, and obviously Aidan and Lorcan are still great servants. And they're only in their early 30s. At club level, you can still operate. What probably makes it impressive about Kanturk is that they are going well in both codes. They're in the quarterfinal of Senior A football now at the weekend. And, it's a town, but it's a relatively small town. Like Kanturk came up out of junior at a time there about 15 years ago when Cork were kind of just redrawing the grades and they didn't win junior to come up. There was 4 teams came up that season. So they came up without winning it, but they've made up for it since. Played in Croke Park, won multiple county titles. They're a serious team, but it's funny, like there are 6 Walshes basically playing, between Aidan and Tommy Walsh and 4, sometimes 5 other Walshes. So it is a rural story that way for people who are, used to that kind of style thing, or you've one family backboning a club, and it is like, it's, Aidan Walsh and his cousins they're backboning that team. And nearly all of them are 6 foot tall to 6'4", like they're tanks, like, they are big, strong guys and they can hurl as well. So Kanturk would have a lot of admirers around Cork for what they're doing. The fact it's dual as well. That's why I think hats off to Kanturk for that,
It's funny.